I perform a criminal investigation of Lyndon Johnson, and while the Warren Commission performed a criminal investigation of Lee Harvey Oswald and determined him to be a murderer without a motive, if you take all of these other possible parties who could have killed the president and combined all their motives together, they wouldn't have as many as Lyndon Johnson himself. He had personal motives, he had economic motives, he had political motives. We start with motive. Then from there we go to opportunity. Lyndon Johnson was involved in planning the trip.
It is without question John Connally who entices John F. Kennedy to Texas. Once they get him there, then they're in control of everything. Motorcade routes, the evidence, the Dallas police, everything. It's their land. It's their territory. Lyndon Johnson and his Texas cronies suckered President Kennedy to Texas.
Everything that was involved in this assassination, pre and post, Lyndon Johnson was involved in. The Warren Commission was a politically biased entity created by Lyndon Johnson for the sole purpose of getting him out of another political scandal. This one, of course, the worst of his career. And the reason I say that, if you look back in history, 1963, November 22nd, what happened? The Texans came out and they said it was a lone killing, a lone assassin. And if you look at law, at the killing of a president in 1963, if it was caused by a lone assassin, was only subject to state jurisdiction, not federal. And Texans came out and they said it was a lone killing. If you look at history, and no one is going to deny it on this panel, on the evening of the assassination, the truth of the matter is Lyndon Johnson called people in Dallas, including the Dallas district attorney, and told him to charge Lee Harvey Oswald with being a lone assassin, regardless of whether anything else he could prove.
If I may interject for a moment, you said who put the Warren Commission together. The answer is Lyndon Johnson. He appointed them. He asked Earl Warren to head the President's Commission. Warren said no, he didn't want to do it. He was basically drafted by Johnson and told that he had to do it. It was a matter of national security, that if the truth were known about this, that it could lead to World War III. The phony evidence planted against Lee Harvey Oswald that he was working for Fidel Castro, had that been made known to the public and had they believed it, Johnson would have no alternative. He would have had to invade Cuba. Had he done that and Castro survived and asked for help from Khrushchev, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, could not back down a second time. This was the excuse, this was the cover, and this is how they were brought in. President Kennedy, after the Bay of Pigs, fired Allen Dulles as director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Dulles hated Kennedy. His whole career was ruined by Kennedy, and he got to be named one of the 7 Warren Commission members. He certainly had an axe to grind.
Edgar Hoover on 2192.
Are you familiar with this proposed group that they're trying to put together on this study of your report and other things, 2 from the House, 2 from the Senate, somebody in the court, a couple outsiders?
No, I haven't heard of that. I've seen the reports on the Senate investigating committee that they've been talking about.
Yeah, well, we think if we don't have, I want to get by just with your filing your report.
I think it would be very, very bad to have a rash of investigations.
Well, the only way we can stop them is probably to appoint a high-level one to evaluate your report.
Yeah.
And put somebody that's pretty good on it from that I could select out of the government and tell the House and Senate not to go ahead with the investigation.
Yes.
Because they get up there and get a bunch of television going, and I thought it'd be bad.
It'd be a 3-ring circus.
Yes. What do you think about Allen Dulles?
I think he would be a good man.
Jack Ruby gave clear clues to his role in the assassination when he was interviewed on camera.
The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives. The people that had so much to gain and had such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in will never let the true facts come aboard to the world.
Now, these people are in very high positions, Jack.
Yes.
Jack, what do you think about the hearing? I want to correct what I stated before. If he was vice president, remember I said he was vice president? Yes, I did when I mentioned about Adlai Stevens. If he was vice president, there would never have been an assassination of our beloved President Kennedy. Would you explain it, Jack? Well, the answer is the man in office now.
It is the melancholy law of human societies
to be compelled sometimes to choose a great evil in order to ward off a greater evil.
The testimony of E. Howard Hunt from January of 2004 about the JFK assassination.
I heard from Frank that LBJ had designated Cord Meyer Jr. to undertake a larger organization while keeping it totally secret. Cord Meyer himself was a rather favored member of the Eastern aristocracy. I think that LBJ settled on Meyer as an opportunist, Perrin like himself, Perrin, and a man who had very little left to him in life ever since JFK had taken Cord's wife as one of his mistresses. I would suggest that Cord Meyer welcomed the approach from LBJ, who was, after all, only the vice president at that time. And, of course, could not number Cord Meyer among JFK's admirers. Quite the contrary. As for Dave Phillips, I knew him pretty well at one time. He worked for me during the Guatemala project. He had made himself useful to the agency in Santiago, Chile, where he was an American businessman. In any case, his actions, whatever they were, came to the attention of the Santiago station chief, and when his resume became known to people in the Western Hemisphere Division, he was brought in to work on Guatemalan operations. Sturgis and Morales and people of that ilk stayed in apartment houses during preparations for the big event. Their addresses were very subject to change, so that where a fellow like Morales had been one day, he was not necessarily associated with that same address the following day. In short, it was a very mobile experience. I was a bench warmer on it, and I had a reputation for honesty. I think it's essential to refocus on what this information that I've been providing you, and you alone, by the way, consists of. What is important in the story is that we've backtracked the chain of command up through Cord Meyer and laying the doings at the doorstep of LBJ. He, in my opinion, had an almost maniacal urge to become president. He regarded JFK as he was, in fact, an obstacle to achieving that. He could have waited for JFK to finish out his term and then undoubtedly a second term. So that would have put LBJ at the head of a long list of people who were waiting for some change in the executive branch.
Every day someone jumps up and shouts and says, "Tell us what is happening in Vietnam and why are we in Vietnam and how did you get us into Vietnam?" Well, I didn't get you into Vietnam. You've been in Vietnam 10 years.